All right, well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Big Idea Podcast. Eric Bramlett here with Tim Sutherland. Last series, we were not in the same room. We were talking together on the internets, and just to keep in that tradition, we're still not actually in the same room. There's a divider here, and he's in another room, right, Tim?
Right, Eric. Listen to this sound it makes.
Try it again. There we go. Now I hear it. So it was kind of fun trusting the internet to make this thing possible, but now we're back, and that feels just as good. We are starting a brand new series coming off of after Labor Day weekend, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's called Chalk the Block. And we're excited about this weekend because this weekend marks the kind of grand opening for our Edgewater campus in the city of Chicago. They've been doing Sunday morning gatherings all this summer, but this weekend marks sort of their publicized, big, brouhaha.
Yeah, and it's what people think about when they think about a traditional launch of a campus.
Right, exactly. They've been in existence for quite some time, but this marks kind of that grand opening of the celebration service.
It's their IPO, if you will.
It's their IPO. They've been running. I wouldn't even say it's beta. It's just that now it's IPO.
Yeah.
So all right, well that's exciting. I'm very excited for that.
Yep.
Be praying about that for that weekend, that first weekend of this series. But we decided that we wanted to kind of embrace what Edgewater has been doing to be a part of the community, and that's part of how this metaphor plays itself out with Chalk the Block. So, Tim, why don't you get us started on what this overall series is going to be?
All right. Well, there's a story behind it, and in case it might have kind of slipped by your attention, one of the things Edgewater has done as a community is several months ago they started taking chalk and going, especially near commuter stations, and writing encouraging, inspirational stuff on the sidewalk, which they called Chalking the Block. They would write things like, hope is stronger than fear, you can live a good story, and then they would do the Twitter, hashtag Chalk the Block thing. And they weren't, directly like, Jesus loves you, turn or burn. It wasn't like that, but they were things that were encouraging people to, really it was a way of reaching out to people and encouraging them to do what we would call around here, celebrate, connect, and contribute. So they were contributing to their community by encouraging their community through chalk messages to celebrate the grace of God and to connect with other people and contribute to the things of God and the needs of people in the world. And so we thought, hey, that's a great idea for a 3C series that helps people get the missional aspects of the 3Cs while doing a good, positive, helpful refresher on what it means to be a 3C Christ follower. So this series will be about both what do the 3Cs do for me as a Christ follower, and how does God work through the 3Cs as missional practices to reach and restore the world.
And it's been a while since we've devoted an entire series to the 3Cs, one right after another. So I think for a lot of our attenders, this is probably one of those series where we might look at it. I mean, I know I myself, having been here as long as I have, Tim the same way, we can kind of look at this series as like it's like let's just kind of repeat and put it into autopilot a little bit. And to a certain extent, that can be true because you are talking about a foundational part of the lifeblood of our church. But you're also talking about something that, from a weekend service celebration standpoint, many of our attenders who are new, and there are many more than you think there are, have not heard this talk and this series in this way from the stage. So it's really, really important that we, even if we end up going to source material, that's stuff that we've done in the past, that we treat it like brand new, because it will be brand new for a great many of our attenders.
Yeah, one of the important things in any group of people is positive, constructive repetition. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to be positive and constructive in our repetition, both for those who it is repetitive for and for those who it's not repetitive for. It's obviously repetitive for us to a certain extent as catalyst type people when it comes to the arts around here. But for other people, it'll be brand new. I've never heard that before. And never underestimate people's ability to forget something that they've heard over 10,000 times.
Yes, absolutely. Vision leaks, right? That's what Andy Stanley always says.
Yeah.
He's kind of smart, that guy. I like him. Let's talk about week 1 then. So we got 3 weeks. Celebrate, connect, contribute.
Yep.
And then week 1 of Chalk the Block, we're going to look up. So let's talk about that.
Well, one of the things the messages of the Edgewater community was encouraging people to do was to look up, to see that life is more than just what you can see and touch and feel, and that God is real, and there are possibilities for your life because God is real and God is present and God is good, even if they never use the word God. You know, they'd say things like life is grace, or they'd say things like love is stronger than fear. And it was encouraging people to kind of experience or consider what's usually referred to. I mean, obviously God isn't up, but it's a matter of speaking. It's kind of something that's ingrained in us very deeply. You know, to look up is to look to God instead of just to what's right in front of my face.
Well, and especially in their scenario where you had commuters, you know, just the busyness of the commuter street, and in that environment where everybody's got their headphones in, no one's paying attention to anybody, anybody's barely holding the door open for anybody, and we're looking down and we see those messages, and the idea that it would inspire you to look up, to change your outlook in some particular way.
And there's more life than what's right in front of you and what you want to do and got to do today. One of the cool things about this series is something we've actually never ever done before, so there is no repetition or reiteration of this. What we're going to do in this series is we're going to do all 3 weeks of the series from the same chapter of the Bible, from the 16th chapter of the book of Acts. It's 3 stories from what is known to biblical type people as the second missionary journey of the Apostle Paul. There'll be stories, at least 2 out of 3 of them will probably be familiar to you, but they won't be familiar at all to probably 8 out of 10 people who are part of what we do. And we aren't going to do them exactly in order, because we're actually going to do them, they appear in the text, you know, 1, 2, 3. We're actually going to do 2, 3, 1.
There you go.
Okay, which will make sense.
That's because the last shall be first, right?
Or the middle. So we're looking at the story of what happens when Paul and Silas reach the continent of Europe with the gospel for the very first time. You know, it starts in the Middle East and then goes north and east into what's called Asia Minor north and west into Asia Minor, and then they kind of cross over into Europe. And when they cross over into Europe, they're really going into Greece as their first landing spot. Greece obviously is not the dominant power, it's part of the Roman Empire, but Greece is definitely kind of the cultural center of the Roman Empire. And so what happens is Paul has this vision and that calls him to go over into Greece, into what's also known as Macedonia. And the very, very first thing they do when they're there is connect with people there. But we're not going to talk about that part first, because what actually happens is through their connecting and through their contributing there, they end up in prison. They end up suffering for the gospel. But while they're in prison, they do this really counterintuitive thing. They are celebrating. You know, it's the middle of the night. They've been beaten within an inch of their life, but it's the middle of the night, and they're worshiping. They're praising God. They're celebrating, and it's not just something that gets them through this trial, through this persecution. It's also something that God uses to change people's lives. You may know the story. This is probably the most. It's the story of the Philippian jailer. You know, they're in jail. They're singing. And
this is Paul and Silas.
Exactly, right? Yeah. And they're singing praises to God, which, if you think about it, barely even sounds like a real thing someone would actually do in such circumstances, but it is real. It's what they were doing. They weren't putting on a happy face. They were trying to get through this thing.
I don't know how they do that without Hillsong United backing them up.
I know.
That's the hard part.
I know.
How do you, like singing Acapulco like that
I know.
is just,
Yeah.
that's got to be rough.
Singing,
it probably didn't sound very good.
Right. Singing Acapulco in Philippi, which
exactly.
is...
That's yeah. Two out of three ain't bad, I guess.
But it is. It's a great story. There's this earthquake, and the prison is busted open, and the Philippian jailer comes and sees that the prison is now no longer a prison. It's just like a former prison, and he draws his sword to take his own life because whoever gets away, he would be killed for that. But Paul and Silas stop him. They save his life. They make sure that nobody runs away and escapes. And so first of all, they save his life. He doesn't kill himself, and then they share the story of God with him. And so their celebrating leads to sharing the story of God, the story of Jesus with them, and the Philippian jailer and his whole household become Christ followers. So celebrating leads to people people finding their way back to God.
Yeah.
And though we're not trying to suggest in this service that that's always the way that it works, it's a wonderful, really cool story of never underestimate what God can do through you when celebrating isn't just something you do for 1 hour on Sunday morning. When celebrating becomes part and parcel, integral to your life, where you're a person who prayer and scripture reading and contemplating the grace of God, that changes who you are, and it makes you different in the world. And some people won't sense that, but some people will. And celebrating is something God can use to change lives. Now, it's a missional practice, even though is something that really strengthens us.
Right. Now, how do you get sort of past the, am I supposed to be happy all the time?
Right.
I mean, these guys were in prison.
Yes.
And they're singing. So now I have to be like that guy who walks around singing all the time like a maniac.
Yeah.
How do I break through what the perception might be of that story into something that's really practical for us about what it means to have a lifestyle, I guess, of celebration.
Yeah. Paul and Silas had been beaten with rods. And if you think about caning in some parts of Southeast Asia, something that leaves permanent scars. So kind of picture them. They've got these big welts and bruises that are bleeding, and their bodies are swollen. So there is absolutely no doubt to anybody who sees them celebrating that they are hurting. Mm-hmm. There's no way you would think, oh, look at them. They're impervious.
They're superheroes.
Yeah, it's not like that one chick on Heroes who, whenever she gets wounded, she immediately heals up. What was the cheerleader?
Right, yeah, the cheerleader.
On Heroes. They aren't like that. They are beaten, they are bloody. I mean, imagine one of their eyes is swollen shut, and they got fat lips, and they might have had, different parts of they definitely had different parts of their body bruised and bleeding. So everybody knew that they were not ignoring their own pain, that they're in pain. And I think that's what's really important about celebrating as being more than some veneer that you slap on to put on a happy face. Is you don't deny that life is hard, and people know you, and they know that you're not saying, well, praise the Lord anyhow. It's not like that at all. It's that deep concept that joy and pain can exist within the same space. And it's that whole thing of what does it mean to rejoice in the Lord always? It doesn't say be happy. It says rejoice. It means celebrate that God's good even when life is bad. And so this is about what does it mean to be a person who, some people they draw closer to God when they're hurting. Some people draw closer to God when things are going well. And this is about being a person who draws closer to God through celebrating when things are going well and when things are not going well. Mm-hmm. And we all need to grow in that. We all lean one way or the other, I think, with that stuff. And so, and I not only need that for me, but the world needs that from me, because that's something that God uses in a really, can use in a really transformative, missional way. So people will not only be encouraged to be more into celebrating themselves for themselves, which is legit, but also to be more into celebrating because they realize, oh man, the world needs this from me. See, I don't think Paul and Silas said, you know what we ought to do right now? I bet if we sing, it would touch the world. I don't think so.
Right.
There's nothing to suggest that.
It was just who they were.
It was almost like it's this whole thing, it's almost like muscle memory for them. It's almost like this is just what we do. And we don't pretend we're not hurting, but we cry out to God, and we praise God, and we sing to God no matter what. You know, there's an awesome verse in the book of Job that says, even though he slay me, yet will I trust him. And it's like, wow. You know, they could have felt very abandoned by God, and we all do at times. But in spite of how they're feeling, they still testified to themselves, to each other, who God is, and it ends up making this huge difference. And it's an awesome story.
And from a foundational, missional standpoint, you're talking about something that goes far deeper than, you know, weekend service attendance or standing up or putting your hand up in the air. You're really talking about full, immersive person. You know, I've become transformed, and this celebrating mechanism is who I am. Yeah,
it's something that's non-negotiable in my life. And not just like, oh, I grit my teeth and read my Bible or say my prayers before I go to sleep. It's not like that. It's about this becoming, as Eric said, part and parcel of who I am. And everybody who's watching this podcast right now knows that the people that you know who are most spiritually mature, celebrating is part of who they are. It's not just something they do because they're supposed to. It's something they do because they need it, and they feed on it, and they thrive on it, and they can't thrive personally and spiritually without it. And I think one thing to need to be remembered for a lot of people, man, even going to church on a regular basis, celebrate, is completely optional. It's not a part of. It's not only not something they do because they're supposed to. It's not anywhere close to who they are.
Right.
And so we got to keep in mind that person who shows up sporadically or only if they have nothing else to do. We keep that person in mind, as well as the person who feels very duty bound to be in church every week, but it stops right there. So we're going to talk about, you know, what does reading the Bible have to do with celebrating? How do I read the Bible in that way? So that's where we're trying to help people go, is I need this and the world needs this.
All right. I like that. I need this and the world needs this.
Yeah.
That's good. All right. Well, let's talk about how that applies to this connecting thing for week 2. So week 2, we're talking about talking about looking around, connecting with the others, and so then you said then at this point we're at what, number 1?
I'm not sure I said it right, because actually in the story in Acts 16, the third thing that happens is them celebrating in jail.
Yes. Okay. Good. So that's the last shall be first.
Right. But the first thing that happens when they get to Europe, when they get to Philippi, when they basically land in Greece, is the very first thing they do is connect.
Well, I think you did say it right then.
Oh, did I?
Yeah, I think you said 3, 1, 2.
Okay.
So
wow.
Yeah, I think we'll rewind the tape and we'll double check.
We'll see.
I think it is.
Yeah.
Tape. I'm hilarious
tape.
With my antiquated references.
What actually is it?
I don't know. It's like ones and zeros. It's just
but what
a
are they
file.
On? What are they on though?
They're in the computer.
They're
in the computer.
Oh,
yeah, it's true.
Cool.
It's true. All right, week 2. Look around, connect.
Yeah.
So tell us about this story. When they arrive, what happens?
Well, backing up a little bit to the connection to the Edgewater story and Chalk and the Block, a lot of their messages that were written on the sidewalks encouraged people. One of them said, you know, you are loved. And if you look at the YouTube video about it, it was a message, the one thing that a mother wanted her son to know. So they didn't mean it as like you are loved by God, although they obviously believe that. They were saying that no matter who you are, you matter, you're important, not just to God, but you matter to us. You're a human being, you count, you are loved. And so there was an attempt to connect with people, even through something as simple as a chalk message that's going to be gone with the next bit of precipitation that comes.
Right, and this year there's no precipitation, so you're actually pretty good for having it up there for a while.
I know. And so a lot of those messages that were written on the sidewalks of the Edgewater area, neighborhood of Chicago, were encouraging people to truly see other people around them, to see not only their own needs, but the needs of other people, to encourage them to reach out to other people, or to let other people reach out to them, basically encouraging them to connect, which is cool because that's exactly the very first thing that Paul and Silas did when they got to Philippi. They went outside of town and they found this gathering of people who basically believed in God but didn't know about Jesus. And they were people apparently of Judaism, Jewish people, and they went out there and they found these people to connect with. It's the very, very first thing they did. Paul didn't charge into the city and start preaching the gospel. The very first thing he did was find people to connect with. And I love that here's Paul as a missionary, and the very first thing he did was connect. That's the very first thing. He connected with people, even though there were no Christians to connect with in Greece. Right. He found some what would be known in those days as God-fearing people, as people who knew there was a God but didn't know about Jesus, and he connected with them. And one of them was Lydia, and Lydia is the very, very first person who finds her way back to God in Europe. And then her home, she was kind of the person who was the catalyst for connecting outside of in this way in Philippi, and her home becomes the basis of the very, very, very first church that Wow. becomes the place to which the book of Philippians was written. And as I was working on the background for this series, one particular commentator suggested that the church in Philippi is the only church that was ever held up to other churches as an example, as a specific church of be like them. You know, the Philippians were they were loyal, they were faithful, they were true, they stuck by Paul even when he was in prison. And even though Paul makes positive references to other churches in general areas, the only church that's ever mentioned by name is this church in Philippi or Philippi or however you say it. I think the more scholastic way to say it is Philippi.
Philippi.
Did I just spit in your?
No. That wasn't. No, that's. I've got my own issues here.
Oh, okay.
It's not related to your saliva.
Okay, sorry. Oh, good.
Philippi.
Or Philippi.
Philippi.
Either way. So it's really cool, and connecting is something that became the basis of the very first church. Connecting led to the very first person to find their way back to God. And what we're trying to convey to people in this service is connecting is not only something you need, it's something people who are hurting and far from God, or not far from God but still hurting around you need. It's a resource not just for you, but for people around you. Connecting is not just a personal spiritual practice, it is a missional practice.
Yeah, it's not just good for you, it's good for the world.
Yeah.
What you said before.
You need it, the world needs it.
Yeah.
And so for some people, it's like, oh, why am I part of a small group when it's not really doing that much for me? Mm-hmm. Hopefully it won't stay that way, A. But B, well, it's not just for you. It's not just about you. It's about the world needs these little communities, these little safe harbors, these little places to know that they are welcomed and loved, because everybody knows that a lot of people's experience of life is they can't find the welcoming and the acceptance and the support and the encouragement they need, maybe especially from the people they love the most. And so connecting is something that not only recharges my batteries and helps me stay strong, and it's something that God uses that way in the lives of the people. And that's clearly what happens with Paul and Silas in Philippi.
And it feels like here too, we would be wanting to encourage small groups to rally around thinking in terms of what's their missional story going to be, what is the thing they're going to get after to take connecting to that next level, so that you're not talking about something that's just about sort of belonging to a club or being a part of a fitting in or something
just
like
what you're supposed to do.
Right.
And the other thing that's really cool about this series, and one of the reasons I'm particularly jazzed about this series, is this. I don't know that we've ever, I know we haven't. We've never done a series before that tried to help people see and experience the connection between the 3 C's and bless.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is something that is completely new about this series. We didn't really talk about B.L.E.S.S before last January.
Right.
And we haven't talked about the 3 C's in the series since
that time.
last January. So this is our first run at helping people see the dovetailing of, celebrating, connecting, and contributing. Oh, that's part of how I bless the world. Those are 3 key missional practices. And these are 3 things that God can use to bless the world. And that's why it's so cool to use the Apostle Paul's second missionary journey, because God's clearly blessing, reaching, restoring the world through them. And they basically go around celebrating, connecting, and contributing. And it changes everything.
Right. No, that's good. That's inspiring.
It is to me.
I mean, that should make people want to join a small group, I would think.
Oh, heck yeah. Yeah, and like helping that small group leader who feels like, why am I do this? Or that person who's like who's hosting a small group and going, oh man, I'm tired of cleaning this place up, or making sure there's snacks or whatever. It's like going, oh, no. There's so much more going on here than just doing that small group thing that, that Dave and John have been talking about more times than we can count since 1989. It's
Since before that.
Yeah, and so we're enlarging people's vision of small groups and that need for authentic biblical community in our lives. I don't just need it; the world needs it.
All right. Well, you sold me. I'm gonna join a small group. I'm
Another
in.
one?
Why not? 3, 4, whatever it takes.
That's right.
All right. Well, let's go on to week 3 then. Let's wrap this up as we talk about contributing. And it seemed like with the Chalk the Block, there were lots of encouragement towards selfless behavior that almost seemed like it was in that mode of like change the world, contribute, serve. The one I like, your life is happening. This is not a dress rehearsal. Make every moment count. And in those kind of messages, you really get a sense of, hey, this is a call to action, a call to serving, a call to doing something.
Yeah.
How does this play out then with this third C, and then the story of Paul and Silas?
Well, we're calling it Look Beyond because a lot of those messages for Chalk the Block were encouraging people to look beyond their own wants and needs and see that God's doing things in the world and God can do things through them. One of my favorites that was used or was chalked on the block was that you can live a great story. And the idea there was that a great story doesn't come primarily from morality or just some individualistic spirituality, but it really comes from the difference that you make in the lives of other people. Don Miller says it well. It's not a great story. Nobody wants to see a movie about a guy named Bob who's trying to get a Volvo. No one cares whether Bob gets a Volvo. That's not a great story. Now, we're not saying anything wrong with having a Volvo, but you just wouldn't see a movie about a guy who worked really hard and put in some extra hours and saved his pennies so he could get one.
Right.
But somebody who overcomes significant obstacles. Why is the character of Rocky so compelling? Because he was this, even though he's this tough fighter guy, he's unbelievably good to everything from single moms to introverted wallflowers to pet turtles. Right?
Yes.
And so he's this person who has an outward focus, even though he'll, break your ribs in the ring if he could. And he's living a great story. If it had only been about him as a fighter, it wouldn't have been a great story.
Right.
And that's, again, I'm stealing all this from Don Miller. But one of the things we're encouraging, so when we talk about looking beyond, that's what a lot of those Chalk the Block messages were encouraging people to see. Look beyond just what you want and need to what God can do through you, the difference that you can make in the world. And that's another way of talking about contributing. There's a great story from, again, Acts chapter 16. After the Apostle Paul and Silas get there and they connect with Lydia, and Lydia becomes a Christ follower, and they begin this first group of Christ followers in Philippi. They're going through town, and it's in some ways it's kind of a scary, freaky story, because there's this slave girl who's demon possessed, But the way you know she's demon possessed is she's actually clairvoyant. She can predict the future. It wasn't like she could pretend to predict the future and she would speak these general things. She apparently, from all we can tell in the text, could actually, through a demonic power, through a demon that had possessed her, actually predict the future. But she was a slave, and so she was being used by her owners to make money for them. And she starts following the Apostle Paul and Silas around, testifying to who they are.
Right.
But that sounds like a good thing, but really, demons are not who you want doing your PR.
No, probably not.
They're not. And so, and it's interesting, the Apostle Paul...
I didn't know that other things could do your PR.
You watch Mad Men, don't you?
Something like that.
Yeah, but and so the Apostle Paul, Apostle Paul cast this demon out of her, and he's saving her from not only a life of demon possession, but if you think about it, this is one of the clearest biblical examples of human trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
She is somebody who is being used and owned by someone else purely for their financial gain. So she is captive not only to this demon, she's also captive to the people who own her as a slave or who have got rights to her as a slave. And so...
and once the spirit's gone and they realize they can't make the money,
yeah,
they're pretty ticked.
And that's what takes us back to the whole thing about Paul and Silas celebrating in prison, because that's when they haul them before a magistrate who has them, beaten within an inch of their lives and thrown in jail. Mm-hmm. And so it was contributing that came after connecting that got them thrown in prison, where they ended up celebrating, which then ended up with them contributing to the lives of the Philippian jailer and his household. And so it's a cool story from a pop cultural standpoint, because it has a clear, undeniable instance of the occult,
Mm-hmm.
which is, I don't know, I think that's fairly hot right now in pop culture. So I'm looking forward to telling this story, because it's not like don't think the fake palm reader at the county fair who you pay $1 for and she reads your palm. No,
fortune-telling machine and big.
Yeah, no, this is an actual demon that literally possesses this girl and can tell and tells the future, and somebody's profiting off of it. I mean, this but see, the Apostle Paul and Silas, they do something about it, and their contributing led to their being persecuted. And this is one of those times where we're going to push hard on going, what do I do in the world to contribute to the world in the name of God that actually in any way is intended to subvert the way things are? We're going to encourage people to contribute in subversive ways. Peter Rollins tells, he's this Irish wild man, he's writing some stories now. He tells this story of, it's a little parable of this guy who gets put on trial by a repressive regime for being a Christian, and they present all this evidence to show that he's a Christian. They have tape of him going to church and raising his hands, and they have his Bible that he's highlighted, and they have pictures of him. They have like spy camera pictures of him praying and things. Right. and he's getting scareder and scareder, because he's what's he going to do? Is he going to deny his faith, or is he just going to be killed for being a Christian? And then the judge declares him not guilty and says, all that Christian stuff you do, we're not worried about that. You're no danger to us. And then he goes from being afraid for his life to being outraged that the non-Christian establishment considers him no threat.
Right.
And it's a wonderful and provocative little tale. I found it really personally challenging. It's like going, what am I involved in that is countercultural and subversive to the way things are, that enslave people and keep the world kind of under the thumb of the spiritual darkness. Mm-hmm. We referenced human trafficking. One of the things I've gotten really interesting is I started talking with a group that's opening a safe house for girls in Chicago who have been forced into prostitution. They're sex slaves. And it's happening right down there on Cicero Avenue between I-55 and Midway. And there has to be a secret place where they can be taken to and hidden, and it's basically like a witness protection program.
Right.
And,
oh yeah.
And see, human trafficking is not something that just goes on in Indonesia or, Malaysia or something. That's happening in Chicago. That's happening within 30 minutes of here. You and I drive by that every time we take a flight out of Midway. Mm-hmm. But it's dangerous to mess with people who are enslaving girls, because and it's like but the goal is not to be a martyr. The goal is not to be cool and jazzy and dangerous. The goal is misspoke there. The goal is to contribute in ways that are not just the standard safe ways. How do I contribute in any way that is subversive to the ways of the world? It's a subversive thing to teach a little kid to read who might otherwise go to prison if he can't read at a fourth grade level by the time he's in fourth grade. We talk about that example a lot, but it's a great one. Even though nobody will get mad at you for teaching a fourth grader how to read, that's subversive of the way to the way things go. Because the way things go in our world is you live in a rich area. There's plenty of money for schools, so you learn to read. You live in a poor area. There's not. So good luck with that. Mm-hmm. And you're most likely going to end up either in poverty or in prison. And as I go on, we are called to do things that subvert the way things are, not just to help people become Christ followers, although there's nothing more important than that, but we're also called to help set people free from the stuff that just messes with them. And it might be something like sticking your nose in the business of somebody who's going through a divorce. I know from personal experience, people don't always like it when you suggest they shouldn't necessarily leave their wife and kids or their husband and kids, and even when you don't do it in a holier than thou moralizing way, it's like, hey, mind your own business.
Well, and I'd say there's nothing more complicated than when you've inspired somebody to do exactly that, and you realize that they have a boyfriend now, they have like these, and they may feel like, yeah, I'm supposed to do that, I want to do that, but the whole world is trying to keep that from happening in a really bizarre way, and it creates, you sort of think, well, it's going to be really simple once they decide that they want to do that. Even after they've decided that they want to do that, the complications that are involved and the hurt feelings and the what it takes to actually reconcile. I mean, it's messy, and there's still plenty of warfare going on, even in that moment.
And there is no romanticism or sentimentality here about helping people. This is about getting your hands dirty. This is about willing to give time that you feel like you don't have. This is about stepping way outside your comfort zone and going, what, I'm called to contribute in ways that I'm not comfortable. It's not a badge of spirituality or some proof that you're a good Christian. It's what we're called to do, and that's why I love this story from Acts 16. Apostle Paul, there's a demon there. He casts it out. Mm-hmm. He's not going, well, you know what? This is part of the unique cultural socioeconomic thing. This actually happened to me. I posted about a little girl in Texas who's 6 years old, and when she was asked what she wanted to do when she grew up, she said, I want to be a stripper. Right. So I posted about it on my Facebook page, and she said she wanted to be a stripper because it's good money, and then all the boys will want to be around me. And I posted something kind of sharp about going, what are we going to do about this? I actually got a Facebook message back, somebody saying you should leave that alone because stripping is a part of that culture and you don't want to do anything to shame them. So tread lightly. And they were discouraging me from doing anything to disturb the path of this little girl who's 6 years old saying, I want to be a stripper. Now, and see, it's not that being a stripper is immoral. It's that being a stripper is exploitive and enslaving. And yet this person who meant very, very well, it's actually a friend of mine, all he could see was, don't upset the apple cart there. Mm-hmm. And see, he's right to tread lightly, because we aren't called to be, Christian bulls in the world's china shop.
Right.
But it just blew me away, and that was the very first response I got to my post was, hey, in that culture,
right,
that might be her only option. Well, if that is, are we going to accept that?
Right. Now let me ask you, because you've used this word earlier, and then you're touching on this, because I was thinking in terms of like reckless versus subversive. Give me what you're hearing as the definition of subversive in this case when we're talking about contributing to change the world, and going back to our original thought process of it changes me and it changes the world.
A subversive act is something that undermines an oppressive status quo. And I realize that sounds all political, but I don't mean it in terms of politics, or like, Occupy
Church Street.
Yeah, this or that. No, we're saying there is a way things are in the world that goes far beyond politics. There's a way that money is made. There's a way that people are treated. There is a way of saying what life is about that needs very much to be undermined by the gospel. And so we're talking about going, okay, that's what I'm called to do. I'm called to undermine the way things are that enslave people and exploit people and hurt people and cause suffering. I need to not just help that person where they are. I need to work against the systems and against the ways of thinking and against the ways of doing business. I mean, for some people, in some companies, it is entirely subversive to simply be honest about your pricing.
Right, to be ethical.
Yeah. And that's not just about being a good Christian, honest person. You will take heat for that. You might lose your job. You might not be able to compete in that marketplace. But the question is, am I called to subvert those practices? No, I'm not the crusader who remakes the world in whatever image I want. I'm the person who is called by God to do something about the way things are that keep people hurting and far from Him.
It's funny because I had a friend who was giving to the church and tithing. Had a friend or family member who was in desperate need financially with hospital bills and things like that. They essentially created an amount of time where they moved those funds over to help their family member. Time passes, the family member is saying, we're good, you don't need to worry. And then they were basically like, well, what are you going to do with that money? And the friends of mine were, well, we're going to give it back to the church. And their relative was so, didn't want to see them throw away that money. We don't need it, but good God, don't give it back to a church.
Oh, by all means.
I think, some of the ways in which we treat money, and that's why giving of our treasures is a part of this contribute aspect, because it is subversive for 10% of the first of your income to go to God is completely subversive and frowned upon, and you're going to be looked at like you're crazy.
And even though in some cases, with the whole when it's seen as philanthropy, it'll be applauded. When it's something that somebody realizes you're doing because you believe the grace of God is real and you want to change the world, and then it's not just about philanthropy, then to other people it starts seeming crazy and maybe a little bit dangerous. And this is something that challenges the way they think about what money is, what money's for, and how we use it instead of being used by it. And so, there's all sorts of subversive economics. There's subversive ethics. There's subversive ways of loving people. You name it. The goal is not to be subversive because it sounds cool. The goal is to be the people of God, because the people of God represent the kingdom of God, and the kingdom of God is always at cross purposes with the kingdom of darkness. And we have to be people who say, that I just can't abide that. I can't abide a kid going to prison primarily because he never learned to read. When I know how to read, I can't take it. I can't take it that there's a little girl in Texas who's already planning on being involved in sex trafficking. I can't take it. I can't take it that my neighbors are going to screw up their kids' lives because one of them won't get counseling and they can't get along and they think divorce is just what you do because you're not compatible. I can't take it. And there's that thing in us where in this service we really want to stir this up and people saying, going, what is it that you I love the movie. Forgive the reference to the title. I love the movie *Inglourious Bastards*, but one of the things that Brad Pitt's character often says is, "I can't abide that. I can't abide that." And see, what he couldn't abide Nazism.
Right.
So he was doing everything he could to wipe it out, and he just couldn't abide that. He just couldn't take it. He couldn't let that go on. And contributing is not about just doing my part to help a little bit where I can. This isn't make the world a better place if you can. No, this is about this call to change the world and to say, I can't take it. Right. It breaks the heart of God. If it breaks the heart of God, it breaks the heart of me, and I gotta do something about it, even if it costs me, just like it cost Paul and Silas.
Well, and the good news is we're not doing that of our own power. And,
exactly.
And what Paul did with that woman, with that girl, was not him.
Right.
It was God.
Yeah, it was the power of God coming through him.
Yeah. And I think that's all of these practices are outside of our own ability to be able to manage and do good, be a do-gooder. It's not really about that. It's really about channeling the power of the one who does it, and for some reason wants us to be a part of it. Which is kind of amazing.
Yeah, and that's where this series is so cool because it's making this connection that some folks will never have made before, and we've actually never tried to make it before. That there is this connection between celebrating, connecting, and contributing, and blessing the world.
All right. Well, I think it's going to be a strong series, so I'm excited about it.
Me too.
And looking forward to what gets crafted. I think that the small group side of this is probably just going to be equally integral in terms of being able to cast this vision. So be praying for our large group components, but also our small group discussion guides and all the ways in which this filters through the entire church. So good stuff. All right. Well, thank you. Thanks, Tim. Appreciate your time.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And this is Tim. I'm Eric, and we will see you later. So long, everybody. Hey, look, it's Alec. He's dumb. He's dumb. Look at how dumb he is. So dumb. Standing there being dumb.
I think he's trying to subvert that pane of glass.
Yeah. And he slides down. And if he doesn't clean it, then we'll tell Mike Charda.